When Ethan returned to the private lounge with the hot toddy, its warmth barely penetrating the chill that had settled deep in his bones, he saw Caleb. Lounging on the plush leather sofa, Caleb was the center of a laughing, adoring circle of their colleagues. An easy arrogance on his face that was a stark contrast to the gentle, almost timid demeanor he always showed Ethan. Ethan's hand faltered on the heavy oak door. In the next moment, Caleb spun his phone on the table, a smug grin spreading across his lips. He announced that the bet was won. He casually asked if they preferred to pay up via Venmo or cash. The booth erupted. Someone clapped Caleb on the back, expressing his utter shock when Ethan had introduced him, marveling at the public display of affection and how it proved Caleb had him completely wrapped around his finger. Another colleague noted how Ethan, a man who hadn't invited them to a single personal event in years, had thrown such a large birthday party this year, all for Caleb's benefit. A third voice chimed in, filled with grudging admiration, wondering how Caleb had managed to conquer the office's resident Ice King, a man known only for his work ethic and emotional distance. Leo, who was closest to Caleb, leaned in with a conspiratorial whisper. He questioned if Caleb, heir to the Lockwood fortune, was really hiding his identity and chasing a man at a small design firm for such a paltry sum of money. Caleb took a slow sip of his whiskey, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards. He admitted the money was irrelevant, but the real prize, he mused, was watching a man so untouchable, so revered, fall from his pedestal and be played for a fool. Wasn't that, he asked the room, far more entertaining? As Caleb's smile deepened into something malicious, Leo eagerly agreed, shouting that it was immensely entertaining. He pointed out how the great Ethan was out in the pouring rain fetching a hot toddy for Caleb, all because he'd mentioned a slight stomachache from the alcohol. Leo gave an exaggerated thumbs up, praising Caleb's talent for training his pets. The group roared with laughter. Someone else crudely asked what the Ice King was like, and if he was any good, maybe he'd like a taste too. The smile vanished from Caleb's face. He looked annoyed, taking a drag from a cigarette. He described Ethan as bland and tasteless, a relic who recoiled from anything remotely adventurous. He confessed he'd grown tired of him weeks ago. But then his eyes, suddenly glacial, swept over to the colleague who had just spoken. He added a chilling postscript. Even if he were to kick his dog to the curb, it would only ever come crawling back to him. The warmth from the drink in Ethan's hands had vanished. It was impossible to reconcile the man on the sofa with the person he had decided to build a life with. The clumsy new hire who had repeatedly asked for guidance, in whom Ethan had seen a reflection of his younger self. The young man who claimed to come from poverty, who needed this job to survive, stirring a rare protectiveness in Ethan. The bold suitor who, after closing his first major deal, had used the celebratory dinner as a chance to confess his feelings. The one who, when Ethan was at his lowest professionally, had taken him on a motorcycle to an underground rock show, pointing out the band Ethan had loved in his youth and promising him that just as they had found success again, his life would also get better. The man who had said Ethan's life was too rigid and colorless, offering to be the paintbrush that would fill it with vibrancy. That man could not be this cruel stranger, this demon who had orchestrated a sick game with their colleagues just to watch him break for their amusement. Leo's voice, sharp with old resentment, cut through the noise. He spat out that he was sick of Ethan acting high and mighty at the firm, using his senior position to look down on everyone. He sneered that no matter how untouchable Ethan thought he was still just a dog on a leash for a Lockwood. He turned excitedly back to Caleb, wondering aloud what kind of spectacular expression would be on Ethan's face when he found out he'd been played. Caleb leaned his head back against the sofa and raised an eyebrow, his gaze locking directly onto Ethan's eyes, visible through the crack in the door. Their gazes met across the dim, smoky room. Caleb's expression was pure mockery. He casually raised his hand in Ethan's direction and flicked the ash from his cigarette. His voice was cool and deliberate as he said that they wouldn't have to wait long to find out. The lounge fell into a sudden, deadening silence. A dozen pairs of eyes swiveled to the doorway, feasting on the sight of Ethan, disheveled and damp from the rain. He saw it all in their faces. Panic, amusement, a flicker of guilt. He met the gaze of one of them, Sarah. He asked her quietly who had personally recommended her for her last 2 promotions. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she stammered his name, apologizing, trying to blame the others. He looked at another, Mark, and reminded him of the countless times he had covered his shifts so Mark could go home early to his pregnant wife. He scanned the faces of people he had worked beside for years. He knew he was reserved, not one for easy friendships. But he had believed, foolishly, that his actions, his quiet loyalty, had spoken for him, that they understood the genuine care he held for them. Leo's grating laugh broke the tension. He mocked Ethan for trying to play the victim in front of Caleb, asking if he was still lost in the fantasy that Caleb actually loved him. He prompted Caleb for agreement. Caleb's eyes were fixed on the hot toddy in Ethan's hands, his expression unreadable. For Ethan, it was like waking from a long, intoxicating dream. The drink he had been clutching so tightly suddenly felt like a bag of filth. With a swift, clean motion, he dropped the entire cup into a nearby waste bin. He offered a hollow apology for his clumsiness. He then suggested that since Caleb's stomach was hurting, perhaps he should retrieve it himself. Caleb's inscrutable mask dissolved into thunderous rage. His face darkened, a storm brewing in his eyes. Leo, sensing he had misstepped, tried to backtrack, nervously asking Caleb if he'd said something wrong, wondering if Caleb had actually developed real feelings. Caleb cut him off sharply, telling him to shut up if he had nothing intelligent to say. He then beckoned to a young server who was delivering drinks, pulling the startled man onto his lap. He asked the server if he drank. Upon receiving a nod, Caleb took a large gulp of red wine and crushed his mouth against the young man's in a brutal, possessive kiss. Throughout the kiss, his eyes remained locked on Ethan, a blatant challenge. Ethan's face remained a stony mask, but beneath his sleeves, his hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles ached. He couldn't believe his own blindness. After the kiss, Caleb pushed the flustered server into the arms of another colleague and addressed Ethan, his tone light and dismissive, as if he were discarding an old coat. He said that he was young, and that Ethan, an older, tougher cut of meat, was something he'd chewed on for a while but now found himself wanting to spit out. Who was it just a few weeks ago that had canceled plans with all his friends, clearing his entire schedule just to spend more time with him? Who was it, when Ethan had initially rejected him, citing their 10-year age gap, who had silenced him with a kiss and insisted that age was meaningless in the face of love? For 30 years, Ethan had never truly loved anyone, let alone another man. He had wagered everything on this, and he had lost spectacularly. His chest felt as if it had been crushed, every breath drawing in shards of glass. But in that moment, all he wanted was to walk out of that room with a sliver of dignity intact. He recalled a conversation from long ago, one that had seemed absurd at the time. Summoning every ounce of strength, he straightened his trembling frame. He looked at Caleb, his own voice now cold and contemptuous. He stated that a simple breakup was fine. He informed Caleb that since they would soon be family, he, as the elder, wouldn't hold a grudge. Caleb stared at him as if he'd lost his mind, then burst out laughing. He sneered, asking what kind of pathetic joke this was, accusing Ethan of trying to use him to claw his way into the Lockwood family. Ethan calmly corrected him, saying it wasn't Caleb he was relying on. A new voice, steady and resonant with an authority that could not be ignored, cut through the room. A man stepped through the doorway, his presence immediately commanding the space. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, broad-shouldered and radiating a quiet power. A sudden, impossible warmth bloomed in Ethan's frozen chest. The man looked at Caleb and commented on what a fine son he had raised. Caleb shot up from the sofa, his panic undisguised. "Dad," he stammered. "When did you get back?" The single word sent a shockwave through the colleagues, their jaws dropping in unison. The man ignored them all, his cool gaze fixed on his son. He asked Caleb if he now needed to report his travel schedule to him. Without waiting for an answer, he turned, removed the cashmere scarf from his neck, and walked directly to Ethan. His dark, focused eyes made Ethan feel suddenly exposed. He asked Ethan what he was doing here. Before Ethan could answer, the man spoke again, his voice a mixture of exasperation and affection. He said that if he hadn't come, Ethan would have been eaten alive. He gently used the scarf to wipe the rain from Ethan's cheeks, his expression one of fond disappointment. He reminded Ethan that he had warned him about his son. Ethan closed his eyes, feigning exhaustion, a tactic that had always worked with this man in the past. As expected, Julian sighed, a familiar sound of surrender. He carefully finished drying Ethan's face before finally turning his attention back to his son. Caleb had been watching the unnerving familiarity between the two, his face a mask of suspicion. He demanded to know what was going on between Ethan and his father. Julian's gaze on Ethan intensified, a silent question in his eyes. Ethan knew what he was waiting for. When Julian had returned to the country a few weeks prior, the first thing he had done was ask Ethan to be with him, to marry him and move abroad. Ethan had refused without hesitation. But now, standing in the wreckage of his life, all he wanted was to salvage his pride in front of the man who had shattered it. He stated clearly that they were getting married. He looked directly at Caleb. In the future, he added, "You should probably call me." "Bullshit." Caleb exploded. "My father just got back. You've been cheating on me with him?" Julian stepped forward, taking Ethan's hand and lacing their fingers together. He corrected his son, stating that he was the one who had proposed, and that Ethan had only just accepted. He held up their joined hands for Caleb to see. Caleb's eyes were bloodshot, his composure completely gone. He pleaded with his father, insisting it was a joke, that Ethan was his boyfriend. "We're broken up," Ethan said, his voice flat. Julian took off his suit jacket and wrapped it around Ethan's shivering shoulders. He leaned in, his voice a low murmur meant only for him. He told Ethan it was raining outside and that they should go. The purpose had been served. There was no reason to stay in this toxic place. Ethan nodded, ready to go anywhere. As they turned to leave, a hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with bruising force. "Where do you think you're going?" Caleb snarled. "I didn't agree to break up." The injustice of it all, the man who had humiliated him, who had betrayed him, now screaming as if he were the wronged party, caused the dam of Ethan's composure to finally burst. He spun around, grabbed Caleb by the collar of his expensive shirt, and threw him backward with all his might. Caleb stumbled into a table, sending drinks and plates crashing to the floor. "Get lost," Ethan growled. He spared one last glance at Caleb's shocked face before turning his back for good. Behind him, he faintly heard Leo rushing to help, Caleb's voice, raw and furious, shouting that he was the one who did the dumping, that he didn't need him anyway. The sounds faded as a wave of heat washed over Ethan. He felt Julian's cool hand on his forehead. "You have a fever," Julian said. And then the world went dark. Ethan woke in Julian's home. Through a hazy fog, he was aware of Julian bustling around, bringing him water, feeding him medication, placing cool cloths on his forehead. When Julian got up to get fresh water, Ethan watched his back and smiled with a faint sense of nostalgia. He murmured that Julian was still so good at taking care of people. 5 years ago, before Julian left the country, he had been Ethan's boss, his mentor. He had taken Ethan, a poor kid with no connections, under his wing, bringing him to client meetings, teaching him the business, molding him from a clueless novice into a professional who could stand as his equal. Ethan, grateful and determined not to waste the opportunity, had worked himself into the ground, often ending up in the hospital from exhaustion. Julian had been just as skilled at nursing him back to health then, always chiding him for his self-neglect. He'd once said that Ethan could learn to make money in a heartbeat, but could never learn to take care of himself. The words had proven prophetic. Julian returned with the water. He didn't replace the cloth immediately. Instead, he looked at Ethan with a serious expression and said that if it had been anyone else lying there, he wouldn't have given them a second glance. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Ethan was no longer a naive young man. He had seen Julian as a boss, a brother, a mentor, the closest thing to family he had. But he had never, not once, considered him a lover. The next morning, Ethan went to the office not to work, but to resign. The previous night, once his head was clearer, he had drafted his resignation letter. The connections and capital he'd built over the years were more than enough to start his own firm, and the ugly revelation had been the final push he needed. Leo sauntered over, a smirk on his face as he eyed Ethan's box of personal belongings. He mocked him, asking if he was really leaving, unable to take a simple joke. Ethan paused his packing and looked at Leo with genuine curiosity. He wondered if Leo's arrogance came from his association with Caleb. He then pointed out, quite calmly, that he was about to marry Caleb's father. As far as leveraging power went, his was now considerably greater. Leo's face went from smug to enraged in an instant. The old Ethan never would have said something so cutting. Sarah approached awkwardly, murmuring that jobs were hard to find and he shouldn't leave over something so small. Ethan gave a cold laugh. Perhaps to them it was a small thing. He suddenly understood. People had been drawn to him not for who he was, but for the position he held. It was he who had been naive. He ignored them, picked up his box, and walked out. Julian's car was waiting. As Ethan started towards it, a voice called his name. Caleb, looking haggard, got out of a flashy red sports car, no longer bothering to hide his wealth. He blocked Ethan's path, his eyes scanning the box of belongings. He sneered, asking if latching onto his father meant Ethan thought he was set for life. As he got closer, Ethan saw the faint bite marks on his neck. Caleb's eyes, however, were locked on the jacket Ethan was wearing, Julian's jacket. "You slept with him," he hissed, the words more of an accusation than a question. That night, after Julian had laid everything bare, Ethan had remained silent for a long time. Julian, sensing his hesitation, had softened his tone, telling him not to worry about the marriage proposal, that he could wait. But Ethan had cut him off. He assured Julian he wasn't joking, that he was willing to marry him. He admitted it was partly impulsive, a reaction to the devastating blow Caleb had dealt him. He was done with love, with passion. But if he had to choose one person to spend his life with, a partner, there was no one else he would pick besides Julian. Julian's eyes had narrowed, a predatory light glinting within them. He'd warned Ethan that he'd given him his chance, and these were Ethan's own words. Ethan had looked away, muttering that Julian was the one getting the worse end of the deal, marrying someone older who'd just been made a fool of. Julian had moved in close, covering Ethan's mouth with his hand. Their proximity so intimate Ethan could hear both their heartbeats. He'd whispered that it was no wonder people took advantage of him. He'd never learned to value himself. His voice became thick with emotion. He told Ethan that he was a good man, better than most, and that not everyone was worthy of being remembered for so many years, but Ethan was. He insisted that what happened with Caleb was not his fault, that he was the victim. Julian pressed their foreheads together, leaving Ethan's turmoil nowhere to hide. As a tear finally escaped, Julian pulled him into an embrace, his voice softer than Ethan had ever heard it. He told him it was okay to cry. The sound of quiet sobs began to fill the empty room, growing louder until Ethan was letting out all the pain of his shattered trust. Julian didn't just see the broken pieces. He carefully gathered them up and held them together. After Ethan had mumbled something about needing a shower, Julian, seeing his discomfort, had simply found him a change of clothes. Of course, Ethan wouldn't tell any of this to Caleb, but the marks on Caleb's neck were still an ugly sight. So Ethan put a hand on his own lower back, feigning soreness, and said with a sarcastic drawl, "Yes. And he's much better than you ever were." Caleb's eyes blazed with crimson fury. He grabbed Ethan's shoulders, his grip tightening painfully. "You're lying," he snarled. "Tell me you're lying." The pain in his shoulders made Ethan tremble, but he forced himself to meet Caleb's gaze. With the last of his strength, he repeated that it was the truth. Just as he felt he might collapse, the box slipping from his grasp, Caleb's hands were pried from his shoulders. Julian's voice was low and dangerous. "If I see you lay a hand on him again, I will educate you using the Lockwood family rules." Julian caught the box with one hand and wrapped the other around Ethan's shoulders, his thumb expertly massaging the sore spots. He asked Ethan if he was okay, if he needed to see a doctor. Ethan almost laughed at his overprotective nature, but seeing the genuine worry in his eyes, he just reassured him that he was fine. Julian hummed in response but didn't remove his hand, continuing the gentle massage. Caleb clutched his own wrist, clearly in pain. Ethan remembered Julian had trained in martial arts. He asked Caleb, with a hint of malicious satisfaction, if it hurt, before he could enjoy the moment. However, Julian shot him a displeased look, asking if Ethan felt sorry for him. Ethan turned, exasperated, to placate the older man, explaining it was sarcasm. Julian's brow smoothed out. He then glanced at Caleb, who was sweating from the pain, and scoffed in disgust. He berated him for being so weak, asking if he'd forgotten all his childhood training. "Stay out of it," Caleb shot back, "acting like you're my real." He stopped abruptly, the defiance on his face dissolving into a flicker of fear. I didn't mean that. I was just angry." Julian's eyes darkened. He murmured that perhaps it wasn't a mistake, that perhaps Caleb had been thinking that for years. Ethan suddenly felt like an intruder in a deep-seated family drama. He was about to make an excuse to leave when Julian looked at him, then turned back to Caleb. He announced that he and Ethan were going to the Netherlands to get married. When Ethan unlocked his apartment door, he turned to glare at the man who had followed him all the way. He demanded to know why Caleb was stalking him. Ever since Julian announced their plans, Caleb had been relentlessly shadowing him. Julian had just dropped him off when Caleb's sports car screeched to a halt behind them. The three of them crowded in the narrow hallway was ridiculous. As Ethan fumbled with his keys, Julian's hand covered his, turning the lock. He reassured Ethan that with him there, Caleb wouldn't dare try anything. The moment they stepped inside, Caleb's sullen expression brightened maliciously. He followed Caleb's gaze to the framed photo on the coffee table, the jacket on the balcony that was clearly a size too large. The expensive vase Ethan had bought with a month's salary just to hold a single bouquet of flowers Caleb had once given him. Looking at them now, Ethan felt only the faintest ripple of emotion, like a grain of sand dropped into the ocean. Caleb swaggered over and picked up the photo frame. He bragged to Julian about their trip to Big Sur, how Ethan hated packing but had insisted on giving Caleb his only hat to shield him from the sun. He looked at Julian with the air of a victor, telling him he couldn't imagine the way Ethan's eyes used to light up with love for him, brighter than any stars. So what? Julian's voice was like ice. His usual impenetrable calm was gone, replaced by a raw, undisguised disgust. So what if they were the brightest stars? You're the one who crushed them with your own two hands. He took a step toward his son, his voice low and cutting. You approached him as a game. Your sick pleasure comes from possessing and then destroying. The person who loved you is left with festering wounds that you parade around for everyone to see, and you call that a victory. Caleb, you don't know how to love, and you don't deserve to be loved by anyone. The triumphant smirk froze on Caleb's face, making him look like a pathetic clown. Ethan noticed that Julian's hands, hanging at his sides, were clenched so tightly his forearms were trembling. The small ripple of emotion in Ethan's heart grew into a wave, not for the man who had hurt him, but for the man who was hurting for him. This was the first time he had ever seen someone so deeply moved by his pain. Ethan walked to the kitchen, took out a large trash bag, and began methodically gathering the photo frame, the jacket, the cups. Caleb's expression shifted, his mouth opening and closing as if to protest, but pride kept him silent. Ethan ignored him, efficiently bagging everything up. He went into his bedroom, retrieved his passport and other legal documents from a drawer, and came out smiling at Julian. He told him not to just stand there, reminding him of what they came back for. In front of Caleb, Ethan deliberately took Julian's hand. "Let's go," he said. "Let's go get married." They landed in the Netherlands on tickets Julian had already purchased. Staring at the two marriage certificates, Ethan still felt like he was in a daze. Julian, noticing his expression, tightened his grip on Ethan's hand as if afraid he would change his mind. He began to ramble, talking quickly about dinner at his place, how he was a good cook, how he'd bought clothes in Ethan's size so he wouldn't have to borrow his again, how he remembered Ethan liked spicy food. Ethan interrupted his nervous chatter, gently squeezing his hand. He teased him, asking what had happened to the calm, confident businessman who had proposed to him like he was closing a deal. Julian took a deep breath. He admitted that back then, he knew Ethan would say no. He quickly let go of Ethan's hand, wiped his sweaty palm on a handkerchief, and immediately grabbed it again. Ethan laughed, asking why he had bothered to ask then. Julian's usual composure returned, his deep eyes looking at Ethan with an intensity that felt like it could pull him in. He said it was a question he should have asked 5 years ago. He was afraid if he waited any longer, another Caleb might come along. Ethan felt a blush creep up his neck and looked away, muttering that Julian was the one who had left so abruptly back then. Julian was the one who had broken his trust first. After a moment's silence, Julian led him to a car, driving to a nearby property he owned. He said they would talk after Ethan had eaten. Back when Julian was his boss, Ethan had known he came from a wealthy family. But he had assumed Julian was just a rich kid doing a stint at a small company for experience. He used to tease him, calling him young master, Now, sitting in Julian's kitchen as Julian expertly deshelled shrimp for him, Ethan accused him of playing the part of the fake poor boy in some dramatic novel. Julian, without looking up, replied that it was close enough to the truth. He explained that he was adopted by Eleanor Lockwood, groomed from a young age to be her successor, not her son. Caleb, on the other hand, was the son she had chosen for herself. She trusted no one, and everyone who entered the Lockwood family had to be personally vetted by her. Julian paused, a bitter twist to his lips. He said there was one benefit. She never pressured him to marry, because no child he produced would ever be good enough for her. He saw the shocked look on Ethan's face, and his expression softened as he popped a shrimp into Ethan's mouth. Ethan asked if Julian's mother had some kind of traumatic past. Julian nodded. He explained that 30 years ago, the Lockwood family had been all but wiped out in a massive fire at their estate, leaving Eleanor as the sole survivor. He said he suspected she was the one who set it, likely over some story of love and betrayal. He had once glimpsed inside a locked room in her mansion. It was filled with portraits of a woman who looked strikingly like her, supposedly her twin sister. He shrugged, saying it was all ancient history that had little to do with them. He admitted Caleb was nothing compared to Julian, and he'd been wondering about Eleanor's judgment. He felt a pang of sympathy for Julian, not only treated coldly by his adoptive mother but also constantly compared to the favored Caleb. Julian's warm thumb smoothed the worry lines on Ethan's brow. He was the one offering comfort, saying that Eleanor had given him a privileged upbringing, and he had long since outgrown any need for parental affection. Besides, he said, his eyes locking with Ethan's, he had him now, and that was more than enough. Ethan's eyes welled up. Seeing this, Julian's calm facade broke. He sighed and pulled Ethan into a gentle hug. He explained that this was what he'd been trying to tell him for years. Eleanor, through her spies, had discovered his feelings for Ethan and forbade the relationship. While Julian had grown to despise the Lockwood name, she had raised him. So he made a deal. He would go abroad, expand her empire, and earn enough money to keep her and Caleb comfortable for the rest of their lives. In return, she would sever all ties and grant him his freedom. Ethan pushed him away, a flare of old anger rising. He demanded to know why Julian hadn't told him back then. He had considered Julian his only family. Did Julian think so little of him that he would have clung to him and prevented him from leaving? Julian's face was etched with pain. He explained that he knew Ethan, knew that if Ethan had known the truth, he would have sold everything he owned to help. Julian couldn't bear to let him carry that burden. He also confessed that he had once asked Ethan if he preferred to have a son or a daughter someday, and Ethan had said he pictured himself with a wife and daughter. As a man who couldn't offer him that future, Julian hadn't felt he had the right to disrupt his life further before leaving. Ethan fell silent. Back then, he had been a man of rules and routines, and a traditional family was all he had ever envisioned. He hadn't known then that love followed no rules. The misunderstanding with Julian was a painful, missed opportunity. The thorn of Julian's unexplained departure, which had been lodged in his heart for 5 years, was finally gone. Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping, becoming intense and persuasive. "Ethan," he said, "there are no more obstacles between us. Can you try to let me in?" His warm breath was on Ethan's face as he leaned in, his soft lips brushing against Ethan's in a tentative, questioning kiss. They pulled back and their eyes met. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan closed his eyes. Julian kissed him again, this time with a certainty that sealed the past and began their future. After they returned, Ethan took Julian to his small hometown. Felt important. Standing before the graves of his grandparents, Julian remarked quietly that Ethan's smile was just like his grandmother's. Ethan explained that his grandparents had raised him after his parents divorced and abandoned him. As a light rain began to fall, Julian wordlessly opened his coat, holding it over both of them like a shield. In his eyes, Ethan saw a promise of a future where he would never be alone again. Back at the old house, soaked to the bone, they fell into an easy domestic rhythm. Julian sent Ethan to take a hot shower while he made ginger tea. When Ethan came downstairs, wrapped in a fluffy towel, Julian was waiting, his gaze hot and direct. He walked upstairs, and when he returned a few minutes later, he wore only a towel wrapped around his waist, droplets of water tracing paths down his muscular torso. It was a blatant seduction. Ethan stared, then glanced down at his own soft midsection. Julian laughed, took Ethan's hand, and pressed it against his own hard abdomen, whispering that Ethan could have him, all of him. The flirtation escalated, their bodies close, lips brushing against skin, until Julian swept Ethan into his arms, carrying him toward the stairs. "Is this okay?" he murmured against Ethan's ear. Ethan wrapped his arms around Julian's neck and answered with a hungry kiss. Just then, the doorbell rang, insistent and sharp, followed by frantic pounding. "Ethan, I know you're in there. I need to talk to you." Caleb's desperate voice shattered the moment. Julian's face hardened. He looked at Ethan, a flicker of insecurity in his eyes. "Do you want to see him?" he asked. Seeing that vulnerability in the ever-confident Julian, Ethan smiled. He cupped Julian's tense jaw and asked, "Do you want me to?" Julian buried his face in Ethan's neck and mumbled, "No, I want you to never see him again." Ethan stroked his hair soothingly. "Then I won't," he promised. "We're married. It's done." The desire returned to Julian's eyes, now mixed with a possessive fire. He turned, not toward the stairs, but toward the front door. He pinned Ethan against it, his hand cushioning the back of his head, and said, "Let's stay right here. Let him listen." Hours later, Ethan lay exhausted on the sofa. He nudged the chest in front of him. "Your son is probably still out there." Julian checked the peephole and reported that he was gone. Ethan got up, saying he should go and make things clear once and for all. Julian simply wrapped his jacket around him and told him to be careful. Outside, Caleb looked like a ghost. He tried to rush forward and embrace Ethan, but Ethan sidestepped him, his voice devoid of emotion. "What is it?" Caleb, looking desperate and genuinely remorseful, stammered that he was sorry, that he knew he was wrong. He kept trying to reach for Ethan's hand, his eyes filling with tears when Ethan recoiled. He pleaded that Ethan couldn't give the look he used to reserve only for him to someone else. He promised he could change, that he would never mess up again, begging for one more chance. He pulled a small glass bottle from his pocket. It was filled with milk. "I kept it warm," he said, his voice trembling. "See? I'm learning how to love you properly." Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. The pain was gone, replaced by a vast emptiness. "Are you that pathetic, Caleb?" he asked quietly. "When I loved you with everything I had, you threw it away. Now that I've moved on, you come chasing after me. Do you even know what love is? Or is this just another conquest for you, trying to win back what you lost?" Caleb insisted it was love, that he could tell the difference now. Ethan took the bottle from his trembling hand. A flicker of hope ignited in Caleb's desolate eyes, only to be extinguished a second later. "So what?" Ethan said, his voice flat. "Just like this milk, which is now cold and useless, I no longer love you." He casually tossed the bottle into a nearby trash can. "Even if you do love me now, your love is garbage to me." just like this. Caleb's face went slack, his eyes hollowing out. Ethan turned to leave. "Don't follow me again," he said over his shoulder. "If you do, I'll call the police." "Ethan." Caleb's raw shout followed him. "How can you be so cruel? I'm begging you." Ethan didn't stop walking. A bitter smile touched his lips. Some things never change. A year later, in the Netherlands, Julian insisted on a large, formal wedding. He argued that everyone in their lives needed to know they were a couple. Ethan, amused by this uncharacteristically childish side of the stoic man, relented. As the officiant asked them to exchange rings, Ethan looked up and saw a dignified woman sitting in the back pew. Julian's mother. She met his gaze and subtly indicated an envelope in her hand before placing it on the chair and leaving as quietly as she had appeared. Ethan finished the ceremony, and during their kiss, he whispered in Julian's ear that his mother had been there and had left something. Later, they found 2 letters on the chair. One had Caleb's name on it. The other was blank. They looked at each other and, almost in unison, asked, "Do you want to read it?" Then, just as simultaneously, they both shook their heads. Ethan said he didn't need to, because the best part of his life was already right here in his hands. Anything else didn't matter. Julian took Ethan's hand, lifting it so their wedding bands gleamed together in the light, a brilliant, happy glow.